Welcome to Business Owner Bootcamp, the Wealthspire Advisors podcast designed to help business owners and entrepreneurs take control of their finances. Hosts and financial advisors Michael Delgass and Sandy Wiggins break down key topics like tax strategies, exit planning, business valuations, and real-world experiences with expert guests. And now, here are your hosts, Michael Delgass and Sandy Wiggins.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Wealthspire Advisors Business Owner Bootcamp podcast, where we guide business owners, entrepreneurs, and their families through the financial complexities of building, growing, and transitioning their businesses.
I'm Sandy Wiggins, and this is Mike Delgass, and we're the hosts of the Business Owner Bootcamp podcast, where we're going to cover practical experiences about growing, preserving, and transitioning family wealth.
We're going to talk about managing cash flow, transitioning businesses, protecting assets, dealing with taxes, a whole bunch of things that are important for business owners to think about. And this first episode is going to be an overview of some of those topics so people can see where we're headed.
And then moving forward, we're going to have additional experts. We'll talk about case studies and just really uncover the things that most business owners are thinking about or need to be thinking about.
In this first episode, Sandy and I are going to talk together. We'll probably be switching off as we do things in the future, and each of us will take a different topic and talk to those outside experts and really dig into it for business owners and explain how we help our clients. We'll give you some background about who we are, though, and how we work with business owners. Sandy, do you want to talk to us a little bit about how you came to this topic and what you bring to the table?
Yeah, that's great. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm a certified financial planner, and I enjoy working with entrepreneurs and business owners and families. I mean, there's so much I learn from those relationships, and ultimately, the reason why we set out to do this is so that we can share ideas, experiences. Business owners oftentimes deal with many of the same circumstances that other business owners deal with, but there's also all the unique factors that come into play. And so we want to just cover those and help business owners lift their eyes up and see down the road.
Yeah. I mean, I really like being with Sandy because when I say I've been doing this for 30 years, it sounds like I'm younger. So thank you for that, Sandy.
Happy to help.
Yeah, no. I practiced for 10 years as a business and tax lawyer. So I kind of bring the legal and tax part to this conversation, maybe. Sandy has the experience of being a business owner and going through an exit himself. So you bring a lot of interesting things to the table that are really directly applicable. And then I can kind of fill in on the other stuff, the boring stuff, maybe the legal and the tax stuff. But we'll try to make it interesting. What are some of the topics you think you want to talk about, Sandy?
Well, taxes immediately come to mind.
It's what you keep, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Taxes are the biggest inhibitor of wealth creation and preservation. So, let's just touch on a little bit of what the future episodes are going to be about, and then we'll work through our other topics that are of interest to us.
Asking me to talk about taxes is a really dangerous thing because I tend to monopolize the conversation. But
that's why I asked.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, I think things like choice of entity, how do you choose how to organize your business to lower the overall tax burden, but also how you own that business and what the kind of upper tier structure looks like. That can be really important from an estate tax standpoint and an income tax standpoint. A lot of interesting things that I think are underexplored for business owners. A lot of people. And this is what makes this interesting, I think, to us as advisors. Don't want to put words in your mouth, Sandy, but there are a lot of business owners that really need sophisticated planning work out there because their business is very evolved, it's very complicated, it's quite valuable, but from kind of an assets under management standpoint, from an advisor standpoint, maybe most of their wealth is in their business, right? Mm-hmm. And so they need advice that's very high level, but their investable assets may be, more minimal or small compared to the value and size of the business. So we've been able, I think, to bridge that gap a bit. First step is really making sure that people understand what those issues are and that they need the advice in the first place and that they know, where to get it and how to protect themselves. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that.
Yeah, and you spoke about liquid assets today, and most of it's tied up in the business. Well, that will evolve. We'll talk about succession planning, internal transition versus an external sale. And so hearing you say that, it causes me to think about how do you prepare for managing those assets, whether they're a smaller piece of the portfolio or after a transaction, the bigger part of your wealth. The other thing that you sparked is regarding business entity. And, there's income tax considerations today of what's most efficient for running the business and dealing with taxes right now. But we also want to make sure that we're thinking about tax implications of a transaction that may be 5 or 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things are at odds with each other. So maybe touch a little bit on that part of the dynamic and how we want to keep our eyes open and anticipate what the tax consequences might be.
Yeah, I mean, just real briefly, most of our business owners come to us with pretty mature businesses, but we work with people who are just starting up. Maybe they're serial entrepreneurs and that kind of stuff. And the life cycle of the typical business has losses early on as you're making investments and stuff, and you want to try to capture those losses and use them in the rest of your financial life. So you need to make sure that you are getting those passed through to you and that they're landing in the right spot. Sometimes you need to try to maneuver those to different places in the family because different people can use them more than others. But then as the business evolves and makes money and has taxable income, now you need to start thinking about, is this the right structure? There's a lot of flux out there right now too, just given the new administration. I mean, we're talking right at the very beginning of the Trump administration, or the second Trump administration, I should say. And there are a lot of proposals that are interesting that would impact business owners, things as simple as the state and local tax deduction and that kind of stuff. There are a lot of complicated structures that evolved to try to deal with some of the limits that were imposed in the past, and whether we're going to need those in the future is kind of an open question. So there will be a lot of stuff to talk about, and some of that's probably going to change in the short term. So,
well, picking up on that, the concept of change, this is an evolution for a family, for a business owner.
Yeah.
One, the dynamic of owning a business, and just as we get older and our desires change, industry changes, tax laws change. And so I think one of the takeaways I'd like to make sure our audience leaves with is that we're going to talk about all of those things over the series of podcasts. And there'll be some timely things that come up that are driven by change, but there's also a lot of fundamentals that we want to make sure are in place. And we want to balance those two things as we kind of chat.
Yeah. I mean, change and evolution is kind of what business owners deal with constantly, I think, having to adapt to that. I mean, I know you were talking about the transition as one of our topics and that kind of stuff. And I know you had to deal with both personal and kind of family transitions as you were thinking about selling your business. What are the interesting things that you're going to want to talk about there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I had the good fortune of being part of a family business. My parents started our business. My dad started it, but one person just doesn't start a business. It's a family.
Right.
Right. One person makes the decision, perhaps, but everybody's along for the ride. And it's been a fantastic experience to be a part of that and ultimately lead and run a business. So there's a lot of challenges there, but then you think about the dynamics of within a family, and we know we have clients that some of the kids are interested in the business and participate, others take a different road. So the dynamics of family wealth is certainly something that I want to talk about and share some experiences, and there's a lot there.
Yeah, for sure. And the transition across generations or down generations is one of the things that business owners typically wrestle with. I know you wrestled with that a little bit
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, I have two adult sons, and I wanted to make sure that they knew they were invited to the party, so to speak. But I also wanted to make sure that my wife and I that we support them in whatever they do, and being a part of a family business and having wealth tied to it, and now being a part of Wealthspire, I think we're in a good spot where whatever my kids decide they want to do, we certainly can be there to invest and support their efforts, even though they're not directly involved with the family business that my mom and dad started a few years ago. That process and that experience will continue. And we know that a lot of our clients are dealing with a lot of those same dynamics.
Yeah. What I think the stat is that only about a third of family businesses make it to the second generation, and half of those make it to the third, something like that. So that you're down to like 15, 17% third generation businesses. It's a tough slog.
Well, and even on that part of the dynamic, and we're going to talk about this in future episodes. Running a business, you're fully engaged. That's what you get up every day to do. Yeah. And when you're no longer that leader, there's a change that needs to occur,
right.
And how you prepare for it financially and intellectually, and look down the road. You're making a decision when you sell a business, not only impacting your family, but your customers, your employees. And there's a lot that goes into that. And so, again, Business Owner Bootcamp is really about preparing for that long-term strategy, whatever it might be. And those things are going to change. Somebody decides they're going to decide to sell the business. Something comes along where, hey, they change their mind. So there's constant change in this, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about employees and other stakeholders. I think one of the things that'll be interesting in this series is some of the case studies that we're going to try to bring to this discussion. Some real other business owners who I know have wrestled with their own issues in the past about how to protect the people that have come to rely on them, how to, keep a way of life, frankly, for a lot of these employees and other stakeholders in place. Because I know that a lot of my clients made decisions that didn't necessarily optimize their own returns in order to make sure that other people involved in the business were going to be okay.
Yep.
Which is, like you said, I mean, you live and breathe the business, and it's tough not to create attachments and have other people you're looking out for, because you're kind of the paterfamilias of the business, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but once making that transition, you need to be proactive. You need to think about what the next chapter in your life is going to be, and if you can do that, I think it's exciting, it's invigorating. There's a freedom that comes along with that, and whole new experiences. And so, again, that's why you and I are excited about this, is because we're going to bring in those individual case studies. We're also going to bring in outside experts. Valuation is a big question that everybody asks. What's my business worth? So we're going to bring in experts there. It's going to be fun.
It depends a little bit on who is asking the question too, right? I mean, if the business owner is asking the question, they're interested in the real enterprise value. If the IRS is asking the question, you might want to have a different answer or figure out how you can make that answer different, obviously within the bounds of the law. But there are a lot of interesting things to talk about there on valuing smaller slices of the business and how you can use that for tax planning and that kind of stuff. But you had mentioned investments, in the course of talking about your own transition, and what are some of the things that business owners need to think about that maybe are different from the typical person just investing their own money?
Yeah, well, we were having a conversation earlier today about art.
Yeah,
and I'm not suggesting that I'm an art expert or that every client embraces it, but there's so much that goes into every aspect of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be, there's an intellectual, we've got to be smart with our money, but there's also that passion or interest side of the equation.
Right.
And sometimes those things meet. We've got clients that are super engaged and watch the market, by the minute. We have other clients that are much more passive and want to hand that off to our investment team to take a lead. And so, finding out what the client's interested in, how they approach and view money, and what their risk tolerances are, how much risk they should take, how much are they willing to take, kind of lining all that up is the first part of the equation. And then from there, there's so many different investments out there that we can pick and choose from and tailor that to the customer or the client's portfolio.
Yeah, and for business owners in particular, making sure we don't overweight or kind of duplicate other exposures that they have through their own business. But we were talking earlier too about how business owners may need to have kind of a war chest, not really so much a long-term investment fund, but something that is available for them if they need to make an acquisition, the business needs more capital, R&D expenses, whatever those needs are. So business owners might have kind of different piles of money with different objectives to fulfill different goals and that kind of stuff.
And that makes me think about two things. One, what's the appropriate investment strategy? And number two, where should those dollars be held? You and I were chatting about some experiences where holding it in the business has some risks.
Absolutely,
and getting it outside of the business, is another strategy. How do you marry those two things up so that you're getting the most return that you can get, keeping it safe and liquid and available?
Right. I mean, we were talking about how a lot of the risks that business owners have are because they're business owners, right? I mean, that's the biggest source of risk. Whether you're selling or just operating the business, there are different kinds of liabilities that you want to protect against. And a lot of entities are well suited for that. That is, they give good protection from creditors and that kind of stuff. They're kind of encapsulating those liabilities. But if you leave all of your cash in that capsule, you're kind of out of luck if somebody comes knocking and wants to take some of that to fulfill some of those liabilities. So that's going to be an interesting area, talking more about asset protection for business owners, because it's definitely something that people need to think about. And you mentioned too how business owners, the business becomes the kind of be all end all. You kind of wake up with it, you go to bed with it, but you can't forget you've got other pockets, right? And sometimes the pocket of the business isn't the right spot to keep the money in.
Yeah. I think the business is like your roommate. It's there for a while, and most of the time you enjoy the company of your roommate. Every now and then it gets a little frustrating, but that is part of managing that relationship, managing the assets, and protecting it so that it's there. It's the goose that lays the golden egg.
Right. I mean, for people who are getting ready to sell the golden egg and maybe are starting to think about next chapters and that kind of stuff, what are the things that you're going to want to talk about in that context?
Wow, there's a lot there. The first thing that comes to my mind is helping the business owner really on two fronts. One, the technical side, the structuring of the deal. What do you need to do to be prepared? That gets into everything we've talked about. Entity and
right.
But equally important is, what do you want your next chapter to be? How are you going to be prepared and proactive about making that transition? There's a lot there, and I feel like it's very important to be thoughtful about that. It's easy to spend time and energy running a business. You can then get caught up doing a deal, and then once the deal's over, what are you going to do with yourself?
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. And how does that extend into your family, into your community, into your employees? That's what I'm excited about talking about.
Yeah, and every deal is different potentially, and some people might have to quit cold turkey. The deal's done, and you don't have the business
booted out
anymore.
The door.
Yeah, and other people may have to stick around because their earnout is still there, and they need to maximize that value as much as they can. And maybe there's a consulting role down the road, and for a while, I think because private equity was so hot, there was a demand for business owners to come on to some of those portfolio company boards and provide more expertise for some of the acquirers too. So I've definitely seen some people who had a second or third act as a private equity consultant or principal even, or some version of being associated with the folks that actually bought them.
Well, and that's, I think,
like you.
Well, to the
Right.
to the heart of
Yeah.
of what the question is, what do I want to do next? And then when you're out in the marketplace thinking about internal succession or external, and negotiating your deal, all of those things need to come together. You just don't want to do a deal for the biggest dollar if you want to be a part of the business, or you know what I mean. You just got,
there's
to
some
look down the
non-financial
road.
goals that you've
Exactly.
got to think about.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you need to keep being fulfilled and feel like you're productive even after the sale is done.
Yeah.
That's how you stay healthy.
You rest, you rust, right? So you got to keep moving, and you got to have fun at where you spend your time. And entrepreneurs and business owners are so energetic and dynamic. It's easy, as you've said, if your eyes are down and you're running the business, you may miss the opportunity to look down the road a little farther, and think about, the really, really important milestones. And you've said it before. Nobody likes to talk about, mortality and taxes and getting old. But that's part of this exercise, and we want to make it easy. We want to talk about the topics that are front of mind or even back of mind that nobody wants to spend any time on because it's not fun.
Yeah, we don't get to be immortal just by refusing to talk about death. That's not on the table.
And I think we do our best work when we have a client that is open and transparent and willing to explore these things. Because if we can get into that partnership, we really, really can make some great progress. And if there are areas that are off limits, we certainly will respect that. But it's best for everybody, I think, involved if we can work even to talk about, well, why is that an area you don't want to deal with? Because that might come back and bite you later on.
And a lot of times I think the topics people don't want to discuss are often the ones that need the most lead time to be able to plan around effectively. So we need to make sure it's being brought to people's attention and that they're thinking about it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, you asked me a good question. You asked me what I was interested in. How about you? What's getting you jazzed about this?
Well, I think that each family brings a really interesting and unique set of problems, but opportunities too, right? So a family business is its own thing, and there are all the family dynamics within it as well, and those are really interesting, and they're the opportunities for transitioning wealth in a really effective, tax efficient way. Family businesses are like the best thing to do that with. They're kind of tailor-made for tax planning in that respect. So I really enjoy that part of it. It's really interesting. I think we can make it interesting for people who are suspicious of taxes being interesting. But there are other things we haven't talked so much about that I want to explore. Things like, we partner with businesses, but those businesses themselves might be partners, and dealing with your business partners and dealing with their potential infirmities or eventual death or things like that. That planning appropriately when you're not the only owner is often even harder, right? And sometimes that's because you started with a partner and you need to, right at the outset, plan for death, disability, retirement of both of you. But sometimes it's because you brought in employees and you tried to give them some skin in the game, make sure that they were, invested, in a general sense in the business also. But now you've got a lot of other things to navigate. You can't just distribute whatever you want now because somebody else is going to get a piece of it. potentially. So talking through those things, I think, will be interesting too, because there are a lot of interesting complexities to navigate there.
Yeah, you speak of incenting key employees,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, there's a bunch of tax considerations
Oh,
there,
yeah.
and how do you
Yeah.
do it through non-qualified plans? You know, depending on what entity type you are, the tax implications can be significant. And once you've done it, it's hard to undo it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
yeah.
figuring out how to incent people and do it in a way that it doesn't handcuff yourself from running the business, making sure that it's attractive for a buyer without too many limitations of what you've done, and it's hard to undo.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an under-discussed part of business planning also, is there are a lot of really interesting solutions to problems, but they're not always problems people actually have. Sometimes it's solutions in search of a problem, and people get overly complicated, and they kind of nail themselves down to a particular set of rules or structures, and then they want help extricating themselves from it, and that's not always so easy if you've not thought through it to start with.
Well, one thing I know about you is you're great at asking questions of your clients so that you can glean that understanding of what their goals are, their circumstances, their situation, their limitations. And with those answers, you create a one-off, masterpiece to help them get to where they want to go. And, maybe tell us a little bit about your approach on how you help clients that way.
Well, I think the goal discovery is number one. And I think you kind of laid it out already. You've got to really understand what people are trying to accomplish at a detail level. You need to look around the business. You need to understand it. You need to, I love touring our clients' businesses. I think that's really fun, and listening to them explain how they approach processes allows us to understand how they think, but really fundamentally where they're trying to get to, because the way they talk about this is how we do it, this is why we do it that way.
The culture.
Yeah, the culture, but it also is revealing the kind of end goals that are kind of unstated sometimes as to where they're trying to get to. And sometimes that's very family oriented. Sometimes it's very like, these are the numbers and we're just trying to maximize the numbers. They're all kinds. And we try to, bring some of the sympathy and empathy you bring as a business owner, but also just as a sympathetic guy that I know you to be, bring that to understanding what their real unstated goals are also, so we can help plan for that. Because if they, we were talking before in the context of asset protection, if one of those goals is to, be bigger in their industry or control more of the supply chain or something like that, that's a really important goal that we need to understand. But it's not always something that people come out with first, right? First, what they often say is, well, I want to, I've got some money outside the business. I want to do okay with that. And I want to, be able to pass it down to my kids or something along those lines. But then you need to, tease out the other parts there and really understand what they're trying to accomplish. Maybe it's, buy the lot across from their facility because they know they're going to expand. Okay, how are we going to do that? How are we going to raise the cash? What's the financing going to be? How are we going to save for that in a way that makes sense from a risk perspective, from the investment risk perspective? But then after that, like, what's the structure going to be? Like, is there going to be a real estate owning entity that's renting back to the operating company? And is that part of the overall retirement plan? I mean, there are all kinds of really interesting things to talk about there. So I'm going to be excited to do some of that and draw some castles in the air.
Yeah, and what comes to mind is a lot of clients have, a lot of business owners have a very clear vision on important aspects of their business, but there are also things that aren't as clear as they would like, and they're not sure what questions to ask,
right,
who to turn to, and hearing you speak about what you're excited about, my question to you is, is that a financial advisor? Is that an investment advisor? Is that a wealth manager? What you're talking about is so much beyond just helping somebody with their investment portfolio.
Yeah, we've talked about this together, that this is the fun part, right? It's not just wearing one hat. It's really getting to know our clients, and our clients become our friends become our clients kind of concept. It's great to see the way their businesses develop and be part of that small part, because they're really the engine driving it, but helping them maximize it and get to the goals that they're actually trying to get to, and making sure we're all clear on those. Yeah, that is definitely the fun part, but it does require putting on other hats and being willing to talk about things that are outside the scope of like the normal wealth manager, with the blinders on, who just wants to talk about kind of, this is how your portfolio did, which is important, but not the only thing on a business owner's mind.
Yeah, I get excited and see reward personally when a business owner, a smile on their face. Yeah. After worrying about something for so long, all these things that we're talking about, taxes and entity and family, and when we're able to help create clarity around many of those components, well beyond just investments, I feel like I see weight coming off of that person's shoulders, and they walk with a little bit more hop in their step.
Yeah, peace of mind is hard to put a price on, but it is something we try to deliver to people, and it's often a multi-year process to get there, depending on what is weighing them down. But yeah, that is really rewarding when you can feel like there's a load off people's shoulders.
Well, maybe that's as we move to wrap things up a little bit. That's probably why we're here, right? That's why I get up in the morning. I know that's why you get up, and our goal through these episodes is to identify the topics that business owners are thinking about today, the things that they should be thinking about in the future, and bring in experiences and understanding, bring in experts, and just kind of have an open conversation about some of these things and see where it goes.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to continuing those conversations with you and with some of those outside experts. So looking forward to it, Sandy.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, Mike will lead some of these, I'll lead some. Yep. Maybe we're on together. We'll certainly bring in experts and outside folks and have fun while we're at it.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Business Owner Bootcamp, presented by Wealthspire Advisors. If you have any feedback or questions, including suggestions for future topics and guests, reach out to your hosts or send us an email at clientrelations@wealthspire.com.